Hi, I'm Lauren Beukes. It rhymes with mucus. The correct Afrikaans pronunciation is Beukes, but I'm afraid I've ruined it for all the other actual Beukeses out there. So, I am a novelist and I've been a storyteller for a very long time, and there are two quotes that I feel are really relevant right now. Carl Sagan's "We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the universe to know itself." And Muriel Rukseyer, "The universe is made of stories, not atoms." So I think humans are, I believe, genuinely unique in the fact that we tell stories. Animal intelligence is, of course, amazing and misunderstood. There's a talk later at 4:40 on understanding animals. Please go to that. It'll be much more in-depth than this. But baboons, animals have an intelligence, and they do tell stories to a certain extent as well. I have a friend who works for the WWF, and she works with baboons. And she says baboons do a kind of Love Island thing, where the female baboons will sneak off to mate with a lower status male. And if they mate with a high status male, the leader of the troop, they'll make a big production of it, lots of noise, very, very graphic and loud. But if they sneak off with a lower status male, they're keeping quiet. So that's a kind of level of deception in storytelling. Crows, as we know, are just absolutely amazing. They hold grudges. They will remember your face and dive bomb you and tell all the other crows to dive bomb you as well if you have wronged them. They hold funerals. They might hold autopsies to try and figure out what has happened, some little forensic action around a dead crow to figure out why this crow died. Orcas are amazing. They sink yachts, as we know, which is absolutely wonderful. They're also generally matriarchal pods. And they have also reintroduced a fashion trend, which they did I think 24 years ago. It's just come up again, where orcas have been spotted in the wild wearing dead salmon on their heads like a hat. And I am here for orca fashion. Elephants, again, also mourn their dead. They hold funerals. One amazing use of AI lately was actually that they figured out that animals have actual names for each other, that elephants have names for each other, and they call each other by name. They analyzed a whole bunch of data sets about that. And they will also hold grudges. There was a case in India where an elephant not only trampled someone to death who had wronged him, but then went back to the funeral of the woman and stomped her corpse again. But does this count as storytelling? Because, I don't know. I mean, we just don't maybe have, there might be an amazing oral tradition that we just don't understand. We just don't have the understanding of the language. But as far as we know, animals don't tell stories the same way humans tell stories. Elephants are not, as far as we know, telling neo-colonial kind of parables about Baba the elephant going back to civilize his people. Orcas are not, as far as we know, telling stories about 20,000 leagues above the sea. And baboons are not creating mythologies about hanging out with witches in South Africa. This is from one of my favorite books as a South African. It's a book of amazing South African mythology. And another favorite image of that is of the impundulu, which is the lightning bird. And this is where I think humans are so unique. And I think stories are fundamentally what makes us human, because we want to desperately explain things. So, South Africa is not the only country which has lightning and storm gods. Obviously you have Thor in the Norwegian territories, the god of thunder and lightning in Japan. We use storytelling as a way to understand ourselves and the world around us. And on a very personal level, that could be we do this every day. Why do bad things always happen to me? Or I'm just really lucky. Or on a greater scale, we get into history, where people might come to a territory like South Africa, a country like South Africa, and decide, we're the superior people. We deserve all the things. And yeah, same, now. This is, we tell ourselves stories all the time. It is innate to our nature, and we tell them to other people, and this is how we communicate. Stories also allow us a deep empathy and connection with other people. It is genuinely our way of connecting. And unfortunately, this asshole is from South Africa. I'm so sorry. It's just very painful. We went through a wonderful time where we had Mandela, we had Charlize, we had Trevor Noah, and now we have Elon Musk, and that's just very painful. But I think what's amazing about South Africa is we have this philosophy called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is, I am because you are. You are a person because of other people. And that is the foundational thing which makes us human. And what allows us to connect with other humans is storytelling. Elon Musk said famously that empathy is the fundamental weakness of Western civilization. But I think empathy is the fundamental strength of every civilization. And it's wild that he thinks this. And storytelling is how we get to that. And of course, I'd like to counter that with a quote from Mandela, which is, our human compassion binds us to one another, as human beings who have learned how to turn our common suffering into hope for the future. Stories are dangerous. I'm going to get into a little bit of South African history here. This is Dr. John Carney. He's one of South Africa's most amazing actors. You probably know him from Black Panther. You might have noticed that his one eye is like slightly different. And that's because he was an incredible playwright and actor in like the 70s and 80s in South Africa. He worked together with Athol Fugard. They produced very political plays. And one day the security police beat him so badly he nearly died and he lost his eye. Because the apartheid government, which was a racist, horrifying regime that tortured people to death, murdered people, it was just absolutely awful. They knew that stories were dangerous, but they were also really stupid. And I think this is something we have to keep in mind because stories are also resistance. Fascists are stupid, and we can use that against them. So, you know, he performed in like very realistic plays. But there was a level of South African theatre and storytelling which really confused the apartheid government in charge. So the apartheid government banned a lot of books, like the classic ones, you know, like struggle activists and like people like writing about Mandela's memoir, Nadine Gordimer, Alex Laguma. They also banned, you know, being very Calvinist and very strict and kind of anti-sex, Lady Chatterley's Lover and Lolita, obviously. But they also banned Black Beauty because you couldn't have those two words together. That was bad. And even worse than that. Does anyone remember this TV show V? Came out in like, yes, totally. Great, right? Like the aliens come down to Earth and it looks like they're going to help us, but actually they are like really evil and they start by eating a mouse, and then it turns out they're going to eat us, and they're like harvesting us to keep us. And it aired, 2 episodes aired on South African TV, and then the last 3 episodes disappeared. They just didn't air. And I said to my mom, I was very young at the time, and I said to my mom, like, where did the show go? I'm like so bummed. I really wanted to finish watching the show. And she's like, look, the apartheid government had a problem with it because, you know, some of the humans were freedom fighters. And of course, that's what the ANC called, the people in the struggle against apartheid called themselves as freedom fighters. So she was like, that's why it was banned. And then suddenly it came back on very, very late at night, 3 nights in a row, and my mom recorded at 11 p.m. on her VCR, and I managed to finish watching it. But I remember the story, and I was like, this can't be true. Because I wanted to give a talk about it like a while ago, and I went to go find a journalist friend of mine, and he said to me, no, the real story was much worse than that. It was absolutely terrible. Because it wasn't banned because of the freedom fighters. Our president at the time was P.W. Botha, and his nickname was Die Groot Krokodil, which means the big crocodile. Here's a satirical cartoon of him when he died and went to heaven, or not going to heaven. But he was so vain, I don't know if you remember the show, the aliens ripped off their faces to reveal that there were reptiles beneath. And he was so vain, he thought the show was about him. And that's why he had it banned. And he should have been more worried about the freedom fighters. And actually, unfortunately, there's a problem with the show. The story that he really should have been worried about was Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It was The Cosby Show. And unfortunately, that now has different connotations. But those were the shows which connected to that deep empathy, that connected to compassion and understanding, to show a lot of white South Africans that, hey, black people are people too. And they can be funny, and they can be doctors, and they can be, you know, like have like weird like suburban dramas. And it was just absolutely fascinating to like kind of see that. And stories have so much power to like change people's minds and to change the story. And of course, in South Africa, we got to do that. We got to have a brand new democratic election and change everything about our constitution and change the story. So this is one of my quotes, which is those, I mean, obviously everyone knows this one. Those who can't remember history are doomed to repeat it. But I like to add that those who can't imagine the future are doomed to fuck it up. So I think we do have to like imagine different kinds of future. So I wanted to be a writer since I was 5 years old. When I found out you could get paid to make up stories, I thought that was just absolutely amazing. And growing up in South Africa and seeing how genre in particular was used as a way of analogy and exploring big issues, that's absolutely the way I wanted to go. It only took me about like 30 years to get to the point where I could actually do that for a living. I've now published 6 novels in 26 languages. And I've had amazing successes. Stephen King's blurred my book, The Shining Girls, which is about a time-traveling serial killer, but really that's about how we talk about the violence against women and how things have changed for women or not, is also an Apple TV show. It was produced by Leonardo DiCaprio's company. I got to hang out with him on his yacht. There were no orcas, but do you want to see the picture of that? I didn't get to meet Leo, and I also didn't get to go to any of the filming or the premiere because of COVID and because South Africa has the best epidemiologists in the world. And every time there was a new strain of COVID, our epidemiologists were like, hey guys, there's a new strain. And the rest of the world was like, the South African strain. We're like, no, guys, it came from Kent. So that was an interesting story, which prevented me from being able to engage in my own story, which kind of sucked. But yeah, so I'd like to get into kind of some craft stuff that we can talk about, and there's going to be some analogies about my own work along the way. So creating is hard. It's hard. It's really difficult. I've been published since 2005, and it is still as hard as it was every single time. And it's, even when it's fun, even when it's in flow, the neurospiciness doesn't help. The drugs do. When I was 5 years old, I had this dream of like, this is what writing would be like. I'd just sit in my garden and like imagine the beautiful world, and it'd be so incredible, and just kind of make stuff up all day. And this is a better picture of my actual process. You know, all the work while crying. So my therapist has a great analogy for this, which she says, it's like climbing a mountain. Every book is a new mountain. And you're a mountain climber, you're an expert mountain climber, you've climbed all those mountains before, but this one is new to you. And you've got to figure out a route, and you're going to fall down some crevasses along the way and break some limbs and have to resort to cannibalism with the flight that down. No. And I was like, yes, that is accurate, but I'm also building the mountain out of Lego at the same time. And there's a lot of kind of like process and figuring stuff out, and it is just as hard every single time. So I'm sorry if people want to go out and be writers and think it gets any easier. It doesn't. Okay. I know, like, so I'm specifically talking about LLMs. Not just because they have stolen the creative work of a lot of humanity, not just because Anthropic is like buying books and burning them so people don't have access to that knowledge. Your voice is more important. I promise you, like, even if you think you can't write, your voice and who you are, all of your lived experience, you as a human being, like, you know what it is like to stub your toe, to break your heart, to break someone else's heart, to like sit there like afraid at night, to like live in agony about like whatever it is, to like feel great joy, to fall to the floor laughing, to have your lived experience, your voice and who you are, and your lived human embodiment of the world and being in the world with other humans is much more interesting than anything the homogeneous plagiarism machine can come up with. I used to teach at the University of Cape Town, and I taught journalism, and I could help the good students, and I could help the bad students, but there were some students in the middle who were just perfectly fine. The work was perfectly fine, and it was dead in the water. There was nothing I could do to help them. And I'd really encourage you, if you're interested in storytelling or writing, please like find your own voice. That's what matters. And I'd rather it was imperfectly you than perfectly fine. And also the process is the point. Like, that is how you get somewhere interesting, where you're bashing your head against the wall when you're like, I think it was Douglas Adams. No, Douglas Adams had the quote about like deadlines flying, whooshing by. But there's another quote about like writing is easy, and like it's just bashing your head against like the keyboard until like you're streaming with blood. And it is hard. It is hard because you're going deep into yourself and you're thinking, and writing is thinking, and you're going deep into the process, and you have to also allow for the subconscious magic. So please go do that. Like, get into the subconscious magic of like what the thing is. And sometimes things change as you're writing it. And that's just amazing to like kind of see a character evolve in a different way. They don't start speaking to you in your head, or they don't for me, but like they will sometimes do something I hadn't expected, and it's because kind of it's the flow, it's the intuition, it's the thinking process of like putting your fingers to the keyboard, onto pen and paper, whatever it is. That's where the exciting magic stuff happens, and that's how you tap into something genuinely original and fresh. So you can plan, or you can make it up as you go, just freestyle. There's a great E.L. Doctorow quote about how writing is like taking a road trip at night. So you can see 20 feet ahead of you in the headlights, and you just have to stay on the road. You know where you're leaving from, you know where you're going to. You just got to try and stay on the road and like figure out the curves and like figure out what's going to go. You can absolutely do both. I'm kind of a mix of in between. This is my motor wall for the Shiny Girls. So I did a lot of plotting. There are all the different timelines, and the killer takes objects from the girls and he leaves it on other women, and it was very confusing, and I wanted to make sure I had it all very, very clear in my head. And I will always put up a wall of like my plot points and chapters. So I do a lot of planning, and I know where I'm going to, but I would like to leave some magic in between where something strange can happen and take me somewhere new. I think it's really important, like, because writing is hard and storytelling is hard, like, find something you actually really care about. And, that could be like an amazing fantasy world where teacup dragons are like, I don't know, enjoying cups of tea, and that's fine. For me, coming from South Africa, like, I really feel very strongly about writing politically and writing into social issues. With the Shiny Girls, I was writing specifically into violence against women. South Africa has the 5th highest rate of gender-based violence in the world. And of course, most women are not going to be killed by a serial killer. They're going to be killed by the men who say they love us. And I think that's where genre is so interesting, and growing up as a South African and seeing how people use this, was I can use this device as a way of talking about misogyny. I can use this device as a way of talking about violence. Because I could have written a book about domestic violence. I could have written a book of essays about domestic violence. But what I wanted to get at was I wanted you to engage. I wanted you to engage creatively. I wanted you to care about the characters. And I wanted to have this sexy, fun concept and tell a really cool, interesting, different story, which still gets into all these issues. These were from some of my research. I spent time in Chicago where the book is set. And this was in a giant box of police evidence files, which the lead detective I was hanging out with was telling me about. So I just love the look in her eyes. That I don't know who this woman is. I tried to look her up, but there's something in her eyes which is just really, really interesting. And I'd like to know what her story is. I don't know what it is, but I can make one up. Also with The Shining Girls, someone I know was murdered. I'm not going to get into the story. I have spoken about it elsewhere. And partly, there was no justice. The South African police had done no real investigation. The whole thing was one-page reports. And writing The Shining Girls allowed me to get justice. In fiction, I could have justice. I could get through all the rage, and I could also find justice at the end. The bad guy gets what he deserves. And that was really meaningful for me. And all the accolades I've had have been incredible. I've had a wonderful career. But what has meant the most to me is what fiction does so very well, is it connects us to people. And I've had a handful of people come up to me after events, via email, once at a random bar, and say, something happened to me, and they never tell me what it was, and they're like, the way you wrote about it got it right. So fiction allows us to see each other in books, and you bring all of who you are to a book when you read it. And that's just an incredible, magical thing that happens in the world, and I don't think other animals have this. So finding a fresh point of view, if you are writing and you want to get somewhere interesting, I was asked to write a Wonder Woman comic, and they were like, can you set it in South Africa? And I was like, oh, it's a bit problematic. I'm like, so Wonder Woman's going to come be the white savior? I feel really weird about this. So I found a way to twist it around. So it starts classic Wonder Woman cartoon. She's flying on her invisible jet. She's fighting her arch nemesis, the cheetah. Medusa's there. They've turned Batman into stone, and they've turned Superman into Super Pig, because Circe the sorceress is also there. And in the middle of this action-adventure, suddenly this giant hand comes in and rips the cheetah out of shot. And it turns out it's all happening in the imagination of a little girl in Soweto. And she ends up in the story by superheroing up herself. And she has her own invisible jet, and she saves the day. And it's about the power of the imagination and tapping into our own inner heroes. I did the same with Rapunzel. I'm sorry, but this cover is terrible. I did not choose this cover. But I was asked to write a Rapunzel comic set in the Fables universe, where it's very adult, there's a lot of sex and violence. I'd forgotten how much sex there was when I reread it to my daughter when she was 7. It led to the immortal line where she went to school the next day and said to her teacher, one day I'm going to be bisexual like Rapunzel. The school didn't phone me because I think they were just too confused. Anyway, so Rapunzel's all about the tower. I was really interested in exploring a mythology that hadn't been done in the Fables universe before, so I wanted to take it to Japan. I'm like, well, Rapunzel's all about the tower, and Ringu is all about the well. So I basically made Rapunzel the woman from Ringu. And there she is with a whole bunch of haunted hairballs. And research is fascinating because it's actually based on a very ancient legend called Okiku and the Seven Plates, which was the original horror movie Ringu, where a woman was thrown down a well by her samurai lover and came back to haunt him. And there is also something called the Okiku worm, which lives in Japanese wells, which looks like thread, kind of wound around stuff. So it was amazing. Research is brilliant. You can get to really interesting places. And also get to have a haunted Rapunzel with giant killer hairballs. Research is so vital, and it's also the most fun part for me. I genuinely hate writing. I really hate it, but it seems to be the one thing I'm okay at. But research is really fun. You get to talk to interesting people. I was a journalist for a long time, and you also get to go on adventures. So I've been to Antarctica. It wasn't really for research, but I did get a story out of it, which then made it a business expense. With Broken Monsters, I went to Detroit, which I found really interesting as a city because I'm always secretly writing about Johannesburg, where I grew up, and Detroit is a ruined city, and it's it's desolate and destroyed and a terrible place. But actually, it's this incredibly vital and alive, amazing place, or it was back in 2012, 2013 when I went, despite the ruin. And I got to wander around all these weird old buildings and new buildings. and also check out weird art and like just be able to like use all those amazing details. I did the same for Zoo City, which was my book which won the Artsy Clarke Award a few years before that, and I went to Hillbrow and central Johannesburg, walked around, talked to people, got some amazing stories just doing that. Went to a Sangoma, or traditional healer, to like figure out a scene there. I paid for like a consultation. I also went into the, and this is why research is so great, because there are details you would find that you would never get otherwise. I went into the stormwater drains because I had a scene set in the storm drains. And it was actually in Cape Town. You can do a walking tour through them. And it starts like quite modern, and then it goes to Victorian, and then it goes to Old Dutch settlement and comes up under the Old Dutch fort. And it's pitch black, and you have torches, and you have wading boots, and it's very uneven and broken. You're kind of waddling along the broken canal. And the German tourist in front of us was singing songs, which was really annoying. Not very atmospheric. But there were white cockroaches because they hadn't been exposed to the sunlight. So they were kind of glassy and like disgusting. And they were clustered. Wherever there was like water dripping down the side of the wall, they'd be clustered in like little nasty like groups. And the German tourist in front of me stumbled and fell and squished them against the wall, which was disgusting and amazing. And I just took that whole and put it in the book because it was perfect. Not with the German, I made it my hero. So go to the places, do the research, find the things, because you will find amazing detail that you wouldn't have imagined. It's amazing. Also, the power of fiction. One of the places I went in Johannesburg and Zoo City was to the Central Methodist Church, where some 5,000 refugees were sheltering at the time because there'd been a wave of anti-African xenophobic violence. Devastatingly, there's been a new wave of anti-African xenophobic violence in South Africa recently, and all African migrants were told to get out by the 30th of June, this June, and it's been really horrible to see that come up again, because these are the stories we keep telling ourselves, that some people are worse than others, and these are the stories we have to counter. I went to visit the Central Methodist Church with Bishop Paul Verraine's permission. He was also involved in the struggle. They used to hide struggle activists there as well, so it's a very storied place. And it was overwhelming. It was absolutely overwhelming. There were 5,000 people there. I was sitting talking to a woman, Mary, who was a nurse from Zimbabwe. She was wearing a white linen suit. And she was saying that she doesn't feel like she can really trust people here. She doesn't have anyone she can trust to tell her stories to. And that was her verbatim words. And afterwards she said to me, "Do you want to see where I sleep?" And there were people coughing. Like there was a guy sitting there with like he had no shoes and his feet looked like he'd walked here from the DRC Congo, which he probably had. So we go downstairs and we're kind of fighting past people who are all now trying to find somewhere to sleep. And the men are like just camping down wherever they can. Somebody's like lucky and he's got a little piece of cardboard to like camp down on like the concrete staircase. The lights are flickering. We get down to a basement about the size of this hall, and it is standing room only. I can't see how people are going to lie down here. It's a lot of women and children. It's all women and children. All their possessions are like packed up in the back in like cages. It's those rattan, those woven like rattan white and blue plastic suitcases you get from Chinese stores. And it's devastating. And there are babies being bathed in buckets, and the babies are, some of the babies, Mary tells me, are like the result of rape at the border, because sometimes that's what it costs to get across the border. And it's devastating, and I reel out of there, and my nice white friends from the suburbs picked me and my fixer up. So I hired a man who works with journalists. He's Zimbabwean himself, Johnston, black Zimbabwean. He and his family have been in South Africa for 10 years. And my friend's like, "Oh my God, how was it?" And I'm still trying to like figure out how I feel about all of this. I'm like overwhelmed. And he's like, "It was pathetic. Those people were pathetic." And I was so shocked, because he was just that distancing of himself. That could have been him and his family if he'd arrived 10 years later. It was just absolutely devastating and horrifying, and I was just so shocked and appalled. But I realized that's what we do all the time. We make it us versus them, and we push people away. And I also realized that I couldn't write about this, that if I wrote about this, it would have to become the entire book. That's the same reason I didn't set The Shining Girls in South Africa, because it would have had to, time travel would have to be about overthrowing apartheid. But I did what fiction does so very powerfully, or I tried to do what fiction does so very powerfully, and I made one character a refugee. And it's the heroine's boyfriend. And I try to get at some of this through his perspective, because fiction allows us to walk through someone else's skin, someone else's feelings, someone else's head. And that's what's amazing about it. But yes, research, very important. The other thing I love is interviewing people, collaborating with people. Other minds are magic. They're not like yours. This is a detective I interviewed in Detroit. He's written a 700-page memoir about his time, and also was my consultant and like told me what I got right and wrong. He has also written a children's book called Who Can, Baby Can, because of course he has. I hang out with theater teenagers and interview them about their lives. This is an incredible unhoused man, James Harris, and I spent a couple of days with him. volunteering in a shelter and talking to him, he used some phrases that I never would have come up with on my own. He described himself as a thug nerd, and he did like all the IT support at the church shelter, and he helped people like put their CVs together. He also called, when he's been on his own since he was 13, when his mother was murdered, and he would move into an abandoned building, put up cheap curtains, and then steal electricity and water from the neighbors, and that was enough to convince people it was legit. But he was also 13, so he'd get other people to move in with him, but he couldn't charge them rent because they wouldn't pay a 13-year-old, they'd beat him up. So he got this woman to come in and pretend to be the landlord and take rent from people. But he called them abandonminiums. Again, that is not a word I would have come up with on my own. So research and other people's heads and the way people think and the way they describe things is magic. So go out there and steal things, like steal conversations, steal like snippets that you hear from things, like go and do the research, talk to people, find out how other people think because it's different to you, which is amazing. And this is like the world's hottest taxidermist. We did a Zoom call, yeah. And again, the scene that she told me about having like a skinned kangaroo that she dumped the body in the dumpster and the cops arrived at her door is in the book verbatim because I couldn't not use that, it was so good. Yeah, just a detective I hung out with. This is my friend Robert David Jones who drove me around Detroit. When he picked me up the second time in this vehicle, I was like, how well do I know this guy? I was like, oh, nice motor wagon. And he's like, oh no, Lauren, it's not a motor wagon. It's a funeral home like van. And I'm so sorry I was late. I was like, we're dropping off a dead old lady just before I came. And again, just incredible detail, great adventures, so much better than writing. But eventually you have to write. Hang out with my friend Haley Tamays in like her lab looking at tapeworm larvae because my most recent book has an interdimensional body-swapping parasite that you can use. And I got to hang out and like mush tapeworm. And she, at the end of the day, she said, do you want a slice of rat brain to take home? And I was like, yes, of course I want a slice of rat brain to take home. So she gave me a tiny slice of rat brain on a slide, and I took that home and brought it into this country. I'm not sure if I've contravened any laws there, but it is dead, so I hope it's okay. Obviously, it's called Pinky, as in Pinky in the brain. I think also, like when you're doing research, and like again, writing is thinking, but also the research, you've got to question your own assumptions. You've got to be curious. You've got to like go and do interesting things, but you also really need to like face up to sometimes the fact that you're really wrong and be okay with that. So I went to Haiti, Port-au-Prince. I again hired a fixer, Yu, who drove me all around. And I had specifically been planning not to get into voodoo because I was like, it's not my place, I don't think it's relevant, I would like to not be that person. When I got there, voodoo is as essential to the culture as traditional healers are to South Africans or Catholicism is to Italy. And to not do it felt weird. So I spoke to the head of the guy who owned the Hotel Olofsson, which is a storied place itself. This is where the first HIV/AIDS case was diagnosed. It was the chef and the head waiter. They were immediately fired. It's also where Graham Greene wrote The Comedians, and it's also where a lot of CIA spooks and people come and still meet today. So the owner of the hotel is related to the president, and I was like, listen, Richard, I want to like try and get to, like, I'd like to do this properly. Like, can you recommend someone? He's like, oh yeah, the bass player in my band. So you and I head off and we go to visit the bass player, and this is the entrance to his apartment block, and we walk through into like a dirt floor. It's obviously where they do rituals. There's colored powder everywhere. They're like kind of things hung up and like bells. And there's a young woman drawing weird symbols on like on the wall in chalk, and a young man watching her and like correcting her. And we go upstairs and we have like this really long conversation, all translated. And we talk about voodoo and the 3 different levels, and it's really interesting. And I'm like, listen, could I have a reading? And he's like, look, I normally wouldn't do that because you're a blonde, a white person, but because you're from Africa, I will. So we go back downstairs, he changes into traditional robes. The young woman's still drawing the weird stuff on the blackboard. We walk through into his consulting rooms. It's amazing. There is the mirror of the universe, bells and nails tangled together, a bit of rum that we pour out for the Loire. This is Ariel, the Little Mermaid doll, is standing in for Azuli, who is the goddess of the Loire of water. And these are the verve, and the verve, which are the symbols that you use to summon the Loire. And he had a whole book of them, like we were looking at like kind of all the symbols. So he gives me the reading, it's really nice, like I'm going to become a famous author one day. I'm like, yeah, dude, you had an hour and a half to cold read me, it's fine. But we go back out, and I'm like, so is that, because you told me there were 3 levels to like becoming like a voodoo priest, or a Hungan or a Mambo. Was that what that young woman was doing? Was she studying to become like a Mambo? He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, the young woman who's drawing the weird symbols on the board. He's like, what? I'm like, no, was that the verve? And he's like, no, that was her physics homework. And it was so magnificent and so perfect, and I was just put in my place, and it was so beautiful, and it felt very familiar. Like, it felt very South African as well, where you had this mix, you know, of like deep kind of spiritual connection and beliefs, and then physics, which this is basically magic as far as I'm concerned anyway. So yeah, it was just great, and again, verbatim in the book. All right, so let's get into actual writing advice. Yeah. So, like I said, it's hard always. It's always hard. It doesn't get any easier. In fact, I think I put more pressure on myself. The most important thing we can do, and I know we all suck at this, is give yourself permission to suck. One writer friend of mine, Jason Arnott, says, being a writer is not hard like being a firefighter is hard. Being a writer is hard like being on fire. And another writer friend, DJ Older, says, he starts every day with permission. With forgiveness. He gives himself permission to suck, and he starts every day with forgiveness for whatever he did or didn't do yesterday. Maybe he wrote 3 pages, but he could have written 4. Maybe he wrote 3 pages and he could save 1 sentence. The only thing which matters is actually getting it down and actually finishing it. And it's really, really difficult, and it's really complicated, and your inner critic is like going to get over it. Ernest Hemingway said, like, write drunk and edit sober. Please don't do that. Like, use the Pomodoro technique, use body doubling, go find a writers group that you can join. There's a wonderful one in London called Write Club London. There are lots of online places you can go. Please, commit to yourself and your story and why you want to write this. Find a way of imposing a meaningful deadline, and find a way to shut that inner critic up. Timers work great. Just write and get anything down. It doesn't matter how crap it is. You can fix it later. You can't fix nothing. So yeah, you've got to finish the thing. Just finish the damn thing. That is the most important thing in the world. And I struggle with this all the time. I will go back and rewrite the first 3 chapters forever. But you only know what you have when you have it all down. And the first draft, draft 0, should be a hot mess. It should be disgusting. It should be vile and incompetent and stupid. Hopefully not those things. You can see how I talk to myself, right? Don't do that. It should just be a mess. It should be a hot mess, and there's some gold in there. And you can pick through and find the gold and get it out afterwards. And then you should walk away and leave it. Leave it for a month, leave it for a week. Just walk away. And then eventually come back to it. And you'll have figured stuff out in the meantime. As I said, there's an incredible subconscious magic that working things through. Ideally, maybe try and find people who can help you read it. So you come back. You do some crow forensics on what worked and what didn't work. You get a second opinion or a third opinion. Find people whose opinions you can trust. Some people won't get what you're doing, and that's okay. Find people who do understand what you're doing, who can make it better. It's really important to be able to take criticism, to be able to fix things. It's also really important to be able to stick to your guns and be this is what worked, and I'm not moving, I'm not deviating. And I understand why you didn't get it, and that's okay. And then you got to fix it. And then this is what writing is. Just rinse, repeat. These are the stages. It's terrible. It doesn't get any easier. Research is way more fun. But this is what it is, and this is how you get to telling interesting stories. But please make them your stories. And it can be the weirdest, cutest thing you're into, but use your memories, use your history, observe things around the world, steal conversations that you're eavesdropping on. I'm constantly taking notes on my phone. I had a reviewer on The Shining Girls say, no one speaks like this. All the characters are so damn witty. The same day, I had someone in my shared studio space that I was using say to me, Lauren, I've just finished The Shining Girls, and you stole half our conversations. And I was like, it's not my fault the reviewer doesn't have cool friends. And I think, the other thing here is also, go and live a storied life. Writer's block is real. And burnout, especially for people who are neurospicy, that's a real thing. It can really mess you up. And people are oh, just get over it, you'll be okay. No, go and find joy, build yourself up slowly, be gentle and kind to yourself. You're building that Lego brick mountain that you're going to have to freaking climb, but you can build small little molehills in the meantime and make cute things and just go find playful spaces to be in. We did a drag king workshop, and it was so damn fun. I got to play with a bunch of people where we dressed up as men and did bad choreography. I'm a terrible dancer and a worse singer, but it was so fun. And it was so joyful and playful. So go live stories and find play and find that joy. And don't be too hard on yourselves. These are some of the books I recommend. Stephen King's On Writing and Dan Fine's story about Chuck Wendig. Chuck Wendig also has a blog. He's very sweary and very funny. Stephen King is less sweary and less funny, but also just amazing. And Annalee Newitz's book, Stories of Weapons, is phenomenal. It's a non-fiction history book looking at propaganda and psyops, specifically tied into science fiction, and how the CIA and like American governments use that, and how people have been able to fight back. It's genuinely a hopeful book, and we can change the story. So please go and tell your own stories, and don't use AI to do it. I promise you, you have it. Even if you think you're boring, the only way you're going to become more interesting is, and better at what you do is by actually writing it, by actually thinking about how you feel. And AI is going to create the most bland, dead version of anything. Change the story. And you can change your own story in your own personal life. We can change history. We can like change the way we talk about things. And that's really important. Because art is the fire we light against the darkness. And that is how we're going to get through these terrible, terrible times. Thank you.